This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 124, The 4 Keys to Strong Relationships with Your SMEs, Your Subject Matter Experts. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is May 28th, 2015. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for episode number 124 of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, we are live on iTunes and also on Stitcher, so if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. That means you'll get new episodes automatically delivered to your listening device of choice. And if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out and a thank you to our friends at Nochmal Consulting out of Denmark. These folks just did an overview of the best marketing podcasts and were kind enough to give a nod to the Content Marketing Podcast. So to Eric and to our friends at Nochmal Consulting, I send a heartfelt tak for your recommendation of the Content Marketing Podcast. We really appreciate your support. The month of May is all about working with subject matter experts, also known as SMEs, here at Resonance. And the month-long focus culminated in yesterday's VIP webinar, How to Work with Subject Matter Experts. And the recording is available for a few days. So if you would like to have the link to that, please do message me via LinkedIn or Twitter or email, and I will give that info later. But message me if you would like to have the link to that recording. I'll have it up for a few more days. Last week, we shared some advice on creating content with your SMEs without losing your mind. If you happen to miss that episode, or if you have lost your mind and need some help getting it back, please feel free to check it out on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. This week, we're moving past the content creation process and talking about how to keep those long-term SME relationships going, how to keep those long-term relationships with your subject matter experts. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. It's back! And by it, I mean the Social Media Marketing Industry Report produced by our friends over at Social Media Examiner. This is the 7th annual study that Mike Stelzner and his team have put together. And what they did, they went out and asked more than 3,700 marketers where they focused their social media activities, and those marketers responded. So it's a wonderful report. It's about, I think it's about 50 pages. I have not been through it completely, but I can share with you some highlights. We are seeing an increased use of social networks, specifically Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Those 3 top the list of social networks where marketers are planning to spend more of their time and effort. Interesting that Facebook is not in that top 3. Speaking of Facebook, there's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of results. 93% of marketers reported that they are using Facebook, but only 45% feel it is effective. And I have to think that has to do with the decline we're seeing in organic reach. Marketers are just not getting the results that they used to from that organic activity. Another interesting highlight has to do with the use of video. No secret that video is gaining in popularity and prevalence in the social web. The study reports that 57% of marketers use video and 72% plan on increasing their use. So those are just a few of the tidbits that you'll find in this free report, and you can download it for free until June 12th. So it is out there, available. Download your own copy. You'll get it in PDF form for you to use and peruse. To get your copy, I have a URL, but it's kind of long, so I'll just advise you to go to socialmediaexaminer.com, and that is all one word, no punctuation, socialmediaexaminer.com, and you will see pinned to the top of that page a link to this wonderful report, the 2015 Social Media Marketing Industry Report. Okay, another bit of news in our news feed is that tweets are showing up in mobile Google searches. So you may have heard there was a lot of buzz earlier this year about Google, Google and Twitter getting together to show tweets in Google searches, and they have begun that with they're actually starting on the mobile side, starting with the iOS and Android apps. And I saw a screen cap of what these results look like, and it looks really nice. It's not just, tweets that are stuck in there, text only with the rest of your search results, but there's actually a nice little ribbon at the top of the screen where you can scroll through the tweets and see the images attached, and it's actually a very nice presentation. So, and I think this is, pardon the cliche, but this is going to be a game changer, because I think a lot of companies who are on the fence about using Twitter, they just don't see have not up to this point seen the value in it. I think they're going to start sitting up and taking notice. For example, just yesterday, I was at a pitch meeting for a potential new client, and they were saying, well, Twitter, I don't get it. I don't see why it would be relevant for us. And I mentioned that, yes, Google is going to start indexing tweets, and they, their tone changed immediately. It's like, oh, it's going to affect our search, our search traffic. Well, tell me more about that. So, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more interest in Twitter on the part of brands who are looking to make their voices heard, especially those brands who are disillusioned with Facebook. So that is the scoop on what's going on with Google and Twitter. Okay, our content hit of the week is a great post by Jay Bear over on LinkedIn. It's called, "Are You Thinking About Your Blog All Wrong?" And, it's funny, as a metaphor for presenting this discussion about blogs, Jay harked back to a fond memory from my high school days, and that is the mixtape. Now, if you were Gen X, if you were, a teenager in the 80s, you were very familiar with the mixtape, and you would, get a cassette and make I guess what we call a playlist today of your favorite songs. And so in bringing up this comparison, Jay points out that blogs, we tend to think of our blog as like an album. This is our body of work. But really, the way it functions out there in the universe is more like a mixtape. So, instead of people following our blogs, people are latching on to individual posts. And that has to do with, or the reason for that, rather, is, number one, the decline of RSS. People don't really subscribe to blogs anymore, although I subscribe to some because I really want to see their content, but also the rise of search and the rise of social sharing. So think about it when you go out there on Facebook and LinkedIn. You don't see anybody saying, oh, I found this blog I think you'll really like. No, they say, I found this post that's really interesting. So it's more of the one-off sharing and the one-off recommendations. So as bloggers, we need to rethink how we approach our blogs, how we market them, and how we promote them. And Jay shares some really interesting suggestions for how we can do that. Anyway, very good post, and I will share the link to it in the blog post for this episode, that particular part of my mixtape. That is it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, feel free to shoot it on over to us so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, the 4 keys to strong SME relationships. Today we are wrapping up our month-long series devoted to those subject matter experts, also known as SMEs. And, just to recap where this series came from, it's something that's very, very specific. And the reason is, when I'm out and about and talking to marketers, I'm always interested in what kind of challenges they're dealing with, especially with their content marketing programs. And what I've heard time and time again is it's working with those engineers, it's working with those doctors, it's working with those software developers, those attorneys, those subject matter experts who have the knowledge that we need to create quality content. But a lot of marketers are really struggling getting those folks on board, getting them to cooperate and to support the program. So that was kind of the impetus for this series. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback on it. So I hope I've been able to help some of you who have been facing those challenges. So anyway, now that we are wrapping up this month, I want to focus on the long-term relationship. with those SMEs, with those subject matter experts. And, as marketers, when we need content from SMEs, or when we need our experts to contribute to content, to give us that information, that raw information that we need to create content, there's a tendency to think transactionally. It's like, okay, I have to produce this blog post on this topic. This person down the hall has the information I need. I'm going to get what I need from him and then go on my merry way. And then, of course, we're on to the next thing. And I'm here to tell you is that we need to change the way that we approach those SMEs. We need to start treating them like internal clients. So instead of, we have an expression here in the States, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Instead of that approach, what we need to do is focus on building relationships, because chances are we are going to need support from these experts on an ongoing basis. It's not about the one-off blog post. It's not about the one-off white paper. We're going to need to be going back to them again and again to get that information that we need for our content. And if we focus on relationships, on building and nurturing those relationships, then every time we go back to that expert, it's going to run a little bit more smoothly, because we are building on that foundation, that relationship that we've established. So with that, I want to share with you 4 keys to building those strong relationships with your experts that can continue to support your content marketing program for years to come. The number 1 key that I want to share is set expectations and stick to them. Now, I talked a little bit about expectations last week, and I think it bears revisiting. I read once, and I cannot remember who wrote this, but basically it was the idea that all the world's conflicts can be traced back to unmet expectations. And if you think about it, that's really kind of true. So the first time that we engage with those experts, the first time we approach them about that first piece of content that we need their help with, we'd be well advised to not just to say, okay, we're working on this, we need your input, but to take time to lay out the entire scope of that content that you need their help with. Why are we creating this blog post? Who is the audience? What do we hope to impart to them? What do we want the call to action to be? Share with them the big picture, and then specify what. Yes, of course, we want to specify what you'd like to expect from them, but also specify what they can expect of you. And so, for example, if you were talking about getting their input on a particular blog post, and let's say you've decided that you're going to send them a draft to review, then that conversation might look something like this. You might say, okay, Brad, on Tuesday, I'm going to send you a review draft, and I'm going to ask you to review it mainly for factual information, review it for accuracy, and I'm going to ask you to return it to me with any comments, by end of day Wednesday. And then when you send Brad the draft of that piece, just repeat those expectations. And so on your side, any expectations that you place on yourself, make for darn sure that you stick to them. Because, really what we're doing here is we're building a foundation of trust. So if you tell Brad that you're going to send him a draft review on Tuesday, make sure you send it on Tuesday, and preferably not, at 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, but, sometime during business hours. And the reason we do this, we have to be, our approach has to be impeccable. It's got to be beyond the pale, because if we stick to our end of the bargain on this very multifaceted relationship, what we're going to do is we're going to gain the respect of those experts. If we say what we're going to do and do what we say, we will gain the respect, and they'll be much more likely to hold up their end of the deal and to be much more amenable the next time we come around looking for your advice. So make sure that you are setting those expectations and sticking to the expectations that apply to your side. Key number 2 is a very, very simple thing that you probably learned from your mama many years ago, and that is to say thank you. For many subject matter experts, contributing to content not only takes up their time and their effort, it can also take them outside their comfort zones. Remember, these experts, as marketers, we tend to think, we think promotionally about everything. We plug a lamp into a socket and say, how can we promote this, right? But these experts don't necessarily think that way. I don't think any engineer has sat back to admire her work and said, wow, this is going to make a great blog post. Or, I can't wait to get a customer testimonial about that. No, so we are asking them not only for their time, but we're asking them to step outside their comfort zones and to spend a few minutes in our world thinking like a marketer. And so when they do that, we really need to show our gratitude for helping us, for playing along, and for stepping into this unusual role for many of them. And I've got to say, folks, I think when you send them your final email, I think just saying, hey, thanks for all your help, I think that's not enough. I think we need to show a little bit more gratitude and a little bit more appreciation. One thing I have done in the past is to send my expert a handwritten note along with a little $5 Starbucks gift card, saying, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to help me with this. The end result was exactly what we needed, and we so appreciate you. And, it's that extra effort. It goes beyond typing out an email saying, hey, thanks, really appreciate it. And it's going above and beyond. And they're really going to remember that. That is really going to make an impression. And again, we're building relationships here. So it puts another deposit in that relationship bank for when we have to go back and get more information from them later on and have them keep contributing to our content marketing programs. Key number 3 is to keep your SME in the loop. Like I said, when we work on content, we tend to get what we need from those SMEs and go on our merry way. But, by contributing, they now have part ownership in that piece of content, whether it's a blog post or a white paper or whatever. So we would be well advised to keep them posted, throughout the editorial process, and but especially let them know in advance when that final product will be published. So like, hey, this blog post is going to hit our blog at 8 o'clock on Friday morning. Keep a lookout for it. And then, of course, after it's published, be sure to send them a link because they're going to be proud of that piece. That's something they're going to want to share with their LinkedIn communities. If they're active on Twitter, they're going to want to tweet it out. I mean, that's, there's a little piece of themselves that's involved in that, and they're going to be really engaged and excited to see that finished product. And another step, an extra step that you might want to take is to loop them in on any big successes. If they contribute to a blog post that goes viral or whatever the equivalent of viral is in your industry, if you see a spike in your website traffic or you see a large number of social shares, let them know about that because that's, again, they have part ownership in that piece and they're going to take a lot of pride in the fact that something they contributed to has delivered such fantastic results for your content marketing program. And then the fourth and final key is to set up for the next round. Remember, we're building relationships. I sound like broken record or whatever the equivalent is. I don't know, corrupted MP3 file here. But setting up relationships and building that foundation that we're going to be able to build on later. So after it's published, after the piece is published and you've gotten your 24 hours of social shares or however much you're tracking, before you wrap this up and put it away, tell your SME something like this. Hey, Brad, I really enjoyed working with you on this, and the finished product is better than we could have ever hoped for. I can see us blogging about this again in the future, and I would love to be able to touch base with you again to maybe take a deeper dive into this or to share another aspect of this. Would it be okay if I call you if we decide to do that? So why take that extra step? Again, it gets back to setting up expectations. So if you set that up and then you do call Brad a few months later, he'll be expecting that call. It's not like you'll be calling him later. He's like, oh, what does she want? I already gave her that post a few months ago. So instead, it'll be, oh, there's another email from Joan. They want to contribute to another blog post, and yeah, that was a good experience, and I'm happy to help them with that again. So what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for success the next time you need input from that particular expert, and then the cycle will start all over again. So those are my short and sweet 4 keys to building successful relationship with your subject matter experts, with your SMEs. If you have any questions about what we just talked about, or you'd like to add to the conversation, I would love to hear from you, and I will give that contact info at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. For today's tip, I want to share a little trick that I've developed for helping subject matter experts to simplify their explanation. So sometimes I'll be interviewing an expert about a particular project or a particular product or a service, and I'll ask them to explain it, and the explanation will be so bogged down in jargon and acronyms and very complex concepts that, I know immediately the audience will never get it as the expert has just expressed it. Sometimes what I'll say is, okay, thank you for that, appreciate it. I'm still having a little trouble wrapping my head around it. So if you wouldn't mind, explain it to me as if I were 8 years old. And then we kind of go into a little role play. And one thing, it's kind of, it kind of lightens the mood. It's a little fun. And what they do is sometimes I'll actually, scrunch down in my chair, playing the 8-year-old. And what I'll do is if they slip back into that jargon or that industry speak, sometimes I'll stop them and say, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? How does that happen? How does that work? I mean, if you have kids, then you know about the questioning game. And it really forces them in a kind of fun and lighthearted way to simplify their explanation so that we as content creators can take that information and spin it into clear, easily understandable content for our audiences. And you know what? Sometimes I have taken SMEs through this exercise and they've actually had, it's forced them to take a different perspective on their work, and it's actually led them to some breakthroughs or to some ideas for how to present something at a conference. So they've actually been able to benefit from it as well. So if you are working with a subject matter expert and trying to cut through the jargon and the complexity, just ask them to explain it to you as if you were 8 years old, and you might be surprised at the results. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. If you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our website at resonancecontent.com. We'll also find links to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. I also invite you to check out our monthly webinar series. That happens on the fourth Wednesday of every month, and our most recent one was just yesterday. It was called How to Work with Subject Matter Experts, and our next one is still in the planning stage, so I will let you know as soon as we get it scheduled so that you can grab a spot. As always, I like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from Jim Rohn. He once said, quote, "If you really want to do something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse." Unquote. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.